come in, join us. I am like being like a teenager taking a selfie. Take a group together as much as you feel comfortable with in a socially distancing way, because we're going to do some group discussion. So yes, we have online students online with us. I'm, technologically okay to do this. I don't know how to turn the camera around in Teams, so they can just see me, but you should be able to hear them at this level. Next time we'll do it on the screen, it'll work better. Before we start, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we will be learning, working together and embracing technology. I was lucky enough in the lockdown break to go to Budgebim National Park. Have any of you been out there in the Western Districts? Unfortunately, I still haven't been able to see them because of lockdown, but that's the site where there are some eel traps that have been around for more than 6,000 years. It's recently become a World Heritage Site. And I think when we think about technology and law, and I mean, I've been calling Marta my sister from another mister this week because I loved her class. I'm sure you did as well, the lecture, and because I love the way that we're thinking about technology here as not just being digital. We're thinking about technology and the way that it intersects with the law, and we're here in a country where law and technology have been coexisting and working together for longer than any other place in the world. And I think we want to acknowledge that privilege. I would like to pay my respects to any Aboriginal people who are with us in this room or in the rooms that you are in at home. For those of you who haven't realised, sorry, there are people here, believe it or not, somewhere. And to their elders, past, present and emerging, and recognise there is no treaty, never ceded. So, my name is Catherine Nolan. You can call me Kath. Oh, I'm going to wriggle around somehow. Please come in. Somebody else explained why I look so ridiculous. We've got people arriving at this toot. It turns out everybody's doing 2 toots in a row. That I only thought that would be me. I didn't realise that would happen to students as well. So, bit of housekeeping as we go. I haven't actually, I just did a toot just now, but the time before that was about 35 years before. So my understanding of what a toot is and your understanding of what a toot is might be slightly different. Mine is, it's an opportunity for us to come together, ask questions, progress where it is that we are with the materials. And we're lucky enough to have Marta with us in this toot. So she's the boss lady. So Marta, actually, you've introduced yourself on the lecture. I'm really excited to be working with Marta because as those of you who've been with me before know I am not an academic. Sometimes I'm a bit too quick to tell people that. I'm not an academic, like it's something of pride. I'm a practitioner and I think of myself as a pracademic. And I've been working in these areas now. I was admitted in 1989 and I've spent pretty much my whole life as a commercial lawyer, predominantly in financial services, which might surprise you. It's actually pretty much all technology work. So I've been working in and thinking about this kind of work for a really long time. Marta, on the other hand, has been researching and thinking about higher level issues for a really long time as well. Some of the work that I know that she's been involved in includes crowdsourcing constitutional work. I noticed you didn't talk about your own work in that lecture, by the way. So any of you know anything about Catalonia and Spain might be really interested in that kind of work. I know she's done work in relation to the use of drones. She finds interesting things and works out where innovation, technology and the law intersect. And so we're very, very lucky to have her with us. So on this board here, which I will turn around, I've got to work out how to share this with you. Actually, I think the easiest thing is to, will it turn around? Yes, it will. So what I need you guys to do is go the easiest way. Oh, sorry. 2 seconds. So is to go on your computers at home to amenti.com and enter that code. The rest of you can point your smartphone devices at that QR code. When the last time I used Menti in a class was at the beginning of 2020, and I had to explain how to use a QR code to people. That has changed. So menti.com 5392620. I haven't got slides. I've just got a number of questions along the way and a couple of models that we will talk about. So there are 12 of you in there, and yeah, if you like something, you can put a little love heart on it.
Sorry, Cass, can you repeat the number? 5392?
5392620.
Correct. I pasted on the chat. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, most people are in. It's in the chat. You guys are all in. So here we go. Let's see how this works. All right, this is going to be really annoying for those of you in the room because my gift game is pretty bad. What technology can't you live without? I would like to hear from all of you. What are your favorite, most important technologies? I think you have 3 words. If you can't choose, you can enter a second time. Nobody will know. But let's identify. A couple of familiar faces there in the online group as well. Nice to see you. Somebody loves their interactive whiteboard. Mobile phone. Clearly helping me today. Phone, laptop. Sorry, that's very hard to see on the screen. I think on your little screens it should look a little bit better. Sorry? Actually, if you wouldn't mind giving it a go, if you're happy to use that special technology. So, oh, that looks good. That's better. Sorry, I won't do that again. It's clearly been a while since I've been in a classroom. So some really interesting things there. It's supposed to be a little, like word map, but clearly we're seeing phone and laptop as high there, but we're getting lots of different calls. I'm going to merge the data with the other group next time around as well. Interesting, this group, many of you have gone with things that are digital or involve some kind of programmatic or some kind of code embedded in them in some way. Where the group before had things, my favourite technology was in there. The thing I can't live without, my glasses. I can't, honestly, my absolute, if I had to give up all tech, and I am a bit of a geek, right? If I had to give up all tech, but one thing, I would keep my glasses without a doubt. So a lot of the things on this list might also be thought of as innovative technologies as well. Not all of them are things. I notice you have e-stores. Is an e-store a thing? It's not really a physical thing, is it? It's a business model. It's an experience. Somebody's put abs. Are you talking about your midriff? Like, oh, ABS. Oh, brake system. Brake system. Yeah, maybe. Sorry, I was. Okay, so are we seeing any kind of patterns there in relation to the kinds of technologies you use? Oh, somebody's got a Roomba. Kind of like scared of the Roomba. I have a scale at home that apparently sends every piece of data about me to China every day. If I get on that scale, it even knows how much liquid I've inhaled or, like what my percentage body weight of water is. And yeah, then I had a look at Yeah, it's like I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't be sharing quite this much information. Maybe let's remove that one and just get a number. Whatever I do, it's disappointing. So how many of these technologies are things that haven't been around for a really long period of time either. So who in this class thinks of themselves as a technology person? Identifies as being somebody who enjoys using technology? Got a shy nod over there, I won't out you. Dev, I can see you're, yes, I know you're a bit of a nerd, that's good. How many of you actually do any programming or? No, me neither. Well, it's not entirely true, but please come in, make yourself at home. So in this class, we're going to be talking about a whole range of technologies, but we're constantly going back to the question of how does technology interact with the law? So this is not a class, Marta and I are in heated agreement on this. This is not a class where at the end of the class you're going to be able to list 20 things that are laws that interact with technology that you now know that you didn't know before. Well, you might be able to do that, but that is not what success in this class looks like. With any luck, by the time you finish this class, you will have considerably more questions than you do right now. That what we will be doing is developing some frameworks and ways of asking questions that will help you negotiate what is, let's face it, one of the most rapidly changing areas of the law. Another way of looking at this class, and actually this is possibly something I haven't discussed with Marta, so we'll find out whether she agrees, is it's also an opportunity to bring all of the stuff that you've learnt so far in your law degrees and apply it to a particular use case or an industry. So rather than thinking about the law as it relates to a particular communication technology, well, we may well do that as well, or the law as it relates to blockchain, we're not looking at blockchain law. We're looking at, well, how do lawyers address the regulatory and the legal issues that are impacted by, or how they impact this particular technology or this particular use. We're also being quite clear here. Now, you've got mainly digital technologies there on the list, but we're really interested in a range of technologies, some of which might not be digital, some of which may not even be innovative, and some of which may not actually have a physical form. So things like new business models or new ways of doing things that are affected by or can only be done as a consequence of the way that technology works. And then what that means for how that thing that you do is regulated. So e-stores is a really good example of that. So the next thing I want you to think about is, and actually let's pick online shopping. We'll just start with online shopping. What law or laws could be relevant to online shopping? Consumer law. It's just go high level. You don't need to tell me what they are. So consumer law, absolutely. Sorry. Contract. Did you? Sorry. I talk about it'll be my glasses and my hearing aid before too long. I've literally learned I'm deaf during COVID because I can't hear anybody with a mask on. I also learned my fancy sport watch. Apparently it beeps all the time. I had no idea. Absolutely no idea because I can't hear it. So contract, consumer law, what else?
We have a number of things on the chat: electronic transactions, privacy law, financial services law, Goods Act, import-export laws.
Absolutely. So we can think about it. We've started off in this room thinking about it as domestic laws. You can also think about it from an international perspective. So much of the debate that's happening in relation to consumer law at the moment is actually that extraterritorialness. At what point? What else is there?
Cybersecurity law.
Cybersecurity. taxation, disputes, could be civil procedure, could be civil procedure in a different jurisdiction, international law. At the end of the day, law applies, right? So again, saying you're a technology lawyer, what does that actually mean? Which brings me to the next question. Actually, sorry, I'm skipping that because we had that conversation. I got it around the wrong way. What areas of law, sorry, I'm supposed to be hiding that. Oh, goodness me. So much better if you come out differently. Just got to work it out. I thought I got rid of the last class's answers, but I didn't. So we'll get more. So what areas of law do technology lawyers need to address? It's kind of, I'm asking the question the other way around now. What skills, what legal knowledge do you need to possess if you're going to hold yourself out to the world as a technology lawyer? Sorry, I need to move this so I can see the chat. Maybe would that be useful?
Oh, Kathy, I can read the chat loud if you want me to do that.
When it's useful, if that works, that would be great. Let's see what's happening here.
So Brett says very wisely, a bit of everything.
Definitely a bit of everything. No, sorry, that's okay. S to hide image, which means I need to hit the button to say show results. There we go. Turns out, actually, you kind of have to do the limbo to drive something with a mouse and hold your camera up. So again, are all these things law? Last time, so one of the things is blockchain law. Now, Lawrence Lessing might say yes. What do you think?
Yeah, a book on blockchain and the law. I can't remember who wrote it.
So, well, think about that. I mean, people will have a different view. I'm probably possibly being a little bit facetious here, but
it's got to be addressed by the law. It's starting to play an increasing contract law.
So
it's changing the way we think.
Could those of you who are online here, sorry, what's your name? Catherine, what a lovely name. Could you hear what Catherine was saying?
Preferably, Kath, if you could repeat the question, that'd be great.
Yeah. So basically, Catherine was saying that that the fact of blockchain is sorry, I'm trying to is altering the nature of contract law, or is people are having to rethink what a contract is as a consequence of that technology. So, which I think when we pull apart what she's saying, she's not saying that blockchain is law, that there isn't a law of blockchain like there is a law of contract, but that how blockchain is regulated, what can be done with blockchain is a question that lawyers need to be asking and regulators need to be asking. And as a consequence of that, a technology lawyer is clearly going to need to understand what those issues are, but also know about blockchain.
Kath, can the audience in the classroom hear me when I talk?
Can you? Yes, yeah. I think they can.
Okay, just agreeing with the last comment about blockchain forcing us to rethink contracts, for example. I would say some aspects of contracts, not everything. A contract still remains an agreement between two parties or more than two parties. What technology brings are new layers, probably, of complexity to this very basic interrelationship between two people.
Absolutely, I would agree with that too. And one of the discussions that we had coming out of the last shoot that I thought was kind of interesting, which I'll reintroduce here, is if we think about a contract, particularly in common law jurisdictions, is basically has developed judge-made law in response to disputes that people have had about certain things. And those disputes have arisen over the last 250 odd years, some of them even longer ago. So they've arisen in relation to particular types of circumstances involving particular types of technology. So you will all remember the postal acceptance rule. I still don't know why we teach the postal acceptance rule. Nobody posts documents to anybody anymore. But you will remember that it's an exception to the general rule, and the exception is that if you send your acceptance by post, it's deemed to be accepted or at the time that it's sent, not at the time it's received. Now, actually with real communications, things happen in the moment. If I say I accept your offer and we're in the room, the time you receive it is immediately at the same time. Electronic Transactions Acts in Australia anyway, all of them pretty much say the same thing. But we have a whole lot of rules that have developed over time in the way that we deal with contracts. So, for example, deeds, a contract that's evidenced as a deed needs to be in a common law jurisdiction, signed, sealed and delivered. Now, we had to look at what that actually meant during COVID in ways that hadn't happened before. I don't know if many of you would be aware, but some changes came into the Corporations Act only 2 weeks ago. I think they are effective from the 23rd of February, which for the first time made it really clear, or the transitional period provisions before, but these are permanent, made it really clear that a deed can be signed electronically and that an electronic signature, you can sign a deed and an agreement, any kind of agreement, in counterparts. A company can sign multiple counterparts. So that's just fancy legal talk for copies of the document that are identical. And if you've got a paper copy and I've got a digital copy and you use a wet ink signature and I use a digital signature, together those two documents will form the one record of our agreement. But it's only in response to COVID that we've actually seen those kind of responses. So I think just as it's true to say that blockchain is challenging the way we think about the law, all sorts of technologies and circumstances are constantly challenging the way that we think about the law. Does that, yeah. Somebody in the last group was saying, see previous. So intellectual property. Anybody want to talk to me a little bit about intellectual property and what sits under this idea of intellectual property and why we need to know about that?
It's easier to disseminate online, so I guess finding the owners, sometimes finding who the initial owner of intellectual property can be more challenging.
So finding owners, yeah, so it's much easier. So if you're thinking about songs or artworks or photographs or writing, can be copy and pasted willy-nilly online. So the way we think about it is completely different. What sort of sits, what is intellectual property? What's it about? Anybody done it as a subject? Ideas. It's about ideas, but what particularly about ideas? If there's a theme that runs through intellectual property. Novel, well, I can see where you're going. I'm trying to get you in a slightly different direction. Often intellectual property is about ownership, isn't it? So there's this underlying assumption that sits behind this idea of intellectual property is that somebody owns the thing that is produced out of this idea. So we'll come back to this over and over again. But sorry, Marta?
Business trademarks, Diana mentions here.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've clearly seen with the growth of the internet too is that question of used to be, so the general rule, corporate rule in Australia anyway, was that if you trade under a name that is not your own, then you have a responsibility to register your business name. You can also create a trademark, which is a piece of intellectual property, but essentially the general business name rule was if I trade under a name that is not my own, so my consulting firm is called Procademy, if I trade under a name that isn't Catherine Nolan, as a sole practitioner or in a partnership or whatever, people need to be able to find where I am so they can sue me. So now, up until really the 1980s in Australia, we did that state by state. In fact, it's later than that. We did that state by state. So only one person could have a business name in a state, but you might need to, if you were a national business, you might need to register your business name in every state. So as the world has got smaller, as technology has made it smaller, that kind of regulation has become absolutely untenable. So if we think about the purpose of registering business names from a regulatory point of view, as opposed to, I know you started with trademarks, but the purpose of registering a trademark is for somebody else's point of view, really, isn't it? It's really about a protection and ownership point of view. But from a regulatory point of view of, let's make sure that we know who's actually buying and selling things. If they're not using their own name, who gets sued if something goes wrong, or who pays taxes, those kind of questions. They're all the kinds of questions that are being asked, but the world has suddenly got smaller because people can trade over borders. But actually, if you're, as I almost did today, I almost bought a frock on online when it just popped up in my social media, and I thought, oh, I'd quite like that. But I've actually got no idea who I'm dealing with. I'm just dealing with somebody who pops an ad on Facebook. I'm not proud of it, you know, it happens. So what I want to do is show you a couple of slides about innovation and just some quotes. And then when we get to the next question, effectively, I'm going to be asking you to share what needs to be true for innovation to occur. So this is Nick Silicon. I'll try and turn it around so you can see it. I'm not sure what you can see on your phones when I get this wrong. So innovation is turning an idea into a solution that adds value from a customer's perspective. Innovation is the introduction of new products and services that add value to the organisation. Creativity is thinking of something new. Innovation is the implementation of something new. Should have put quotation marks on either side of that. I'm sorry. Paul Sloan said that. David Burkus, innovation is the application of ideas that are novel and useful. Like that stray quotation mark. Steve Jobs, I'm sure most of you will have heard of him. Innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not as a threat. So you tell me, tell us, oh, it's there again. Hide, hide, hide. Just to not influence you, really. What do we need to have in order for something to be innovative? We've talked about technologies. What do we need to see in order to make sure something is innovative? So we'll throw ecosystem in there. Just get a few extra responses in.
Let me read the ones from the chat. Process to execute and a problem being resolved.
Problem being resolved. I must admit, that's my favourite one so far.
I like it as well because it's only 3 words. And well, the previous one as well, process to execute, absolutely. And let me throw mine, which is not mine, I wish it was, is from Teresa Amabile. I'm not sure if I mentioned that in the lecture, but Teresa Amabile from Harvard Business School has a beautiful one, which is creativity that works.
Creativity that works. Oh, I should have put that one up there. Actually, I didn't think of it when. So creativity that works.
Yeah.
So I think actually getting the word cloud is quite useful. Can I assume that on your phones, can I just have a look? I should have stress tested this. Can the team actually see, can you see the word cloud? No, you can't. All right. So I just need to make sure. I will be sharing these as we go.
Kath, if you at the end of you want to make a picture and then we can paste it here in the chat later.
Yeah, and I can try and do that. It's just unfortunately would you believe it? The RMIT computer won't let me log on to Teams. It's not downloaded on the machine. It's in the room.
That's unbelievable.
So, or if it is, it was just I couldn't find it, and like I just sort of, yeah, that's how I went. So yeah, creativity that works. So this is really just you guys thinking about what these things are. I mean, again, you've heard what Marta had to say, and she talked about a lot of different innovations. Some of them are my absolute favourites. So she talked about Harrison and his clocks. So now I think Harrison, the story of Harrison and his clocks, or sorry, you might not have mentioned that it was Harrison, but yeah, that's what a nerd I am. Every time I go to London, I have to go to Greenwich and look at Harrison's clocks. But the context that Marta was talking about, that was in solving the problem of longitude. So one of the issues that really was, it was a significant problem throughout all of these countries that had developed these ships that could now go quite long distances. But if you don't know what your longitude is, you're likely to get lost or worse. And so, again, one of the earliest signs of crowdsourcing. So the British government essentially put a large amount of money for the time. I can't remember the actual number of pounds, but it was more than £10,000. It was the equivalent at the time of tens of millions of dollars, essentially to solving the problem of longitude. Now, most people thought the most scientific minds were working the way that those people worked at the time. They thought about the problem in a way that scientific minds thought about it at the time. They thought about the stars and what we can learn from the stars. As you're aware, we still think about it that way. We have default technologies now for times of war that look at stargazing as a way of working out where we are. So that most of the money that was being eked out was being used in these research projects to map the stars, map the sky, because that was going to help us with this problem. But ultimately, we knew that if you could have a reliable timepiece and you could reliably calculate the difference in time from midday in London, essentially, and when the sun is at its highest point wherever you are, you could work out your longitude. So a clockmaker, not any clockmaker, he was a carpenter, and he made wooden clocks. So it's just unbelievable to think about. He made wooden clocks. Before he even entered this competition, he made wooden clocks that were perpetual, like so you didn't have to wind them. And that was where he got this idea about, actually, I can apply this technology, quote unquote, wooden clock. Doesn't feel like technology anymore, does it? Can apply this technology and this thinking that I've done as a carpenter who likes clocks. And I've now been able to apply that to this problem. So I can solve the problem. If I can make a clock that's reliable enough and doesn't lose time on a bumpy ocean, then we can solve that problem. So that's what I think is a really great innovation. He didn't do anything new. He made a clock. People had been making clocks for a long time before him and would continue to do it. But he applied that clock in a useful way to a particular problem. And then he refined it to make sure that it worked in accordance with the particular constraints that it sat in. So I like this idea of usefulness in there. Can we talk about usefulness or utility for a minute? What does it mean for something to be useful?
It makes your life easier.
It makes your life easier. If we're innovating something, whose life do we make easier? Your own, your workers, your clients, it could be anyone. So if we identify this idea of innovation is about solving a problem, almost always innovation will solve our problem for someone. Now, most of the business literature will actually focus in on customers. So one of the things that we'll use in the hackathon, and as soon as I said hackathon, I realised, oh, you're going to have a little chat about assessment because you always want to talk about assessment. So I will come back to that in just a second. But one of the things, we'll use a design thinking methodology in the hackathon, which is one of the core methodologies that the business school uses, the MBAs use for problem solving. But one of the things that we're needing to focus in on, if we're going to innovate, if we're going to come up with something innovative, it needs to be useful. It needs to be useful for a particular stakeholder, and it needs to be useful in the sense that it's solving a problem. So most of the business books will look at particularly customer, and we call it customer-centric design. But actually, you can get utility in a range of different ways, can't you? So it could be in time saving. It could be in actually taking a process away. It could be something that is useful to your staff. It could be just useful for the world at large. So utility might be, we often measure it in money, either cost saving or revenue production. But we can also think about it in a broader sense about our global footprint or rethinking the business model or the way that we approach the world. Sorry, I'm just realising. So can I actually bore you a minute and we'll go back to assessment while I think of it? I can't hold my phone and look at my notes, in case you're wondering. So if you have questions about the assessments, these tutes are good places to raise them. What I really wanted to talk about is just to be really clear. So there are 3 assessments. One of them you're going to pretty much start working on next week because you'll be working with Chris Roper, and we will do a couple of case studies and things in class as well. You'll be writing a blog piece about privacy and data. We'll talk next week a little bit about the tone and the writing of that, if I can help you with that in any way. But essentially, that's quite a structured piece. You know what your question is, your focus is. The idea is that you interact with each other and get to know each other a bit. Should be pretty straightforward. You write it as if you're from a law firm, so you don't even have to use AGLC referencing. You just need to maintain academic integrity. Just as a little hint, no law firm partner is ever going to be overly impressed if you rewrite something that another law firm has published on the web. So I wouldn't be using what other law firms have as your base, but other than that. The second assignment, which I think is probably in many ways the most interesting one, and the one that in many senses today's tute is about, and where we'll be focused in many of these gatherings, is essentially your opportunity to write a research paper. Now that's a proper academic research paper with proper referencing, an introduction, a conclusion, all of the things that you need to deliver a proper academic paper. Reference list, all the rest of it. And you kind of have 3 options there. I like think about it as, you know, Mama Bear, Papa Bear and Baby Bear. If you really like a nice, solid question with boundaries and you know exactly what you need to do and you're just answering the question, there are a couple of questions there and you can pick the one that's most interesting to you. That's the Mama Bear and the Baby Bear, or the Daddy Bear version. The Baby Bear, which I think is much more interesting and opportunity for you, is you can find something that interests you and you can work out where the law and the technology intersect. You can look at the past, you can look at the future, you can think about it from an ethical and a social lens, you can think about it through a commercial lens, you can think about it through a sustainability lens, because like all of those things that we were talking about before, the law intersects in many different ways. You can do it from the point of view of making recommendations for change. You can do what it is that works. The one thing that you need to do is you need to get Marta's approval for it before you do it. So lots of the kinds of conversations we're having in these classes, I'm hoping will help inspire you with thinking about interesting things to research and to write about. That's the plan. So yeah, that's where we're at. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Marta?
Uh, Not really. I think we will have more opportunities to talk about it. This is only I don't want to
Yeah.
overwhelm you with information on assignments. I think rest assured it's not going to be complicated. We want you to pass this course and not add complexity, as I said
Yeah.
before. But you can see that we are aiming at different styles of assignment, blog posts, more academic exercise, more interactive, hands-on exercise. So a combination, someone mentioned before, I didn't mention that, Kath, but someone wrote, I think it was, well, both Eva and Diana, adaptability as a key requisite of cyber lawyers, tech lawyers. Um,
Yes. And constant learning.
And constant learning, exactly. So the three assignments try to capture a bit
Yeah.
this need for adaptability that a tech lawyer develops as he or she progresses in their career.
And the other thing that I think really needs to be from a skills point of view with tech lawyers, particularly because to do anything well, you need to have an understanding of where the risks are and how the technology works, would be collaboration. So the ability across disciplines to talk to, listen to, and work with people in different disciplines. I know that's one of the things that's been most helpful to me in my career. And with that in mind, the last assessment task that you have is the hackathon, where you will have to collaborate with other people. In a couple of just points that I want to make sure that you're aware of in relation to that. Um, you will be working in groups. The groups will be made up of people in your tute. So face-to-face people who are in this room, you will be in groups together, and OUA people who are looking at me on screens right now, you will be making groups as well. I am very much hoping that we will be able to run most of it from in a room here. So groups who want to work together over a weekend can do that. But we've run it online before and it's worked really well. It's just, it depends on how you want to work, and groups can also organise to get together themselves, in a safe and appropriate way. Problems, we'll organise the groups sometime before. We will listen to you if you particularly want to work with somebody. We probably won't listen to you if you particularly don't want to work with someone, but we will listen to groups who come together. Just you need to be within your tute groups. The problems will come out and we'll start the process on the Wednesday of week 11. Then there'll be some facilitated sessions to go through the process over the weekend at the end of week 11, the beginning of week 12. And then in the tutorial session in week 12, each of the groups will be giving their presentation. The groups will be essentially pitching an idea that responds to the problem. So much of what will be happening in these classes too is relevant to the hackathon, because part of what you're going to be asked to do is think about, well, what technologies could solve this problem and what kind of legal issues are going to come up and what kind of approaches might we take? What kind of lens do we want to look at it through?
Exactly. Just let me add that our topics do not cover obviously all the technologies we wish. I would love, for example, to cover maybe next semester, I don't know, quantum computing, right? Or nanotechnology. These are also relevant to, quantum is very relevant to privacy. Nanotechnology is also relevant in terms of ethics. Not saying that you need to explore these for the hackathon, by no means. But if you were interested in developing topics for the assignment to the more research oriented assignment, or consider that there is a technology solution for the hackathon that we have not contemplated in our topics, that's something you can bring. Because again, it's adaptability and curiosity as well.
Absolutely. One of the things that I would always point the hackathon participants to, and this might be useful to you as well for the research paper, is some of the future trends work that's being done. I particularly like Amy Webb's work. She presents at South by Southwest every year with a really detailed kind of look at what's happening in technology, what's happening in society, where trends are going. And she produces it in this, like there's so much data, so much information that you can, and it's much of it is open source, and you can use it in whatever ways that you want to. But all the big consulting firms, South by Southwest is a couple of weeks away, so the 2022 trends report, her report will be out very soon. But the big consulting firms, there are many futurists who come out with this kind of work. And I often think that's a really interesting way to look at, well, because they tend to look at, well, what technologies are available and how do they intersect with a use case? And that can be really useful for your research. Well,
Kath, I just pasted South by Southwest on the chat.
Oh, good.
My only doubt, is it open on YouTube, or is it
her stuff is usually available. I'm not exactly sure whether you can see it live. It's usually available within 24 hours of South by Southwest anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it could be the world's nerdiest YouTube watching party. We'll see how we go. So when we think about innovation, so some of the themes that are coming out, so we've got technology. It might be new technology. It might be a new application of an old technology. Think Harrison's clock. We think about usefulness or utility. We think about that in terms of solving a problem, but also providing some utility, a cost saving, a revenue gain, a time saving, a increase in sustainability, or a removal of toxicity, or could be there's some kind of utility. What does an innovation need to be unique? And somebody's put it in there, so sorry, I'll flip around again so you can see.
We have a no in the chat.
The no, does the no want to defend themselves in relation to their no?
I think a lot of ideas and the way that people make things better can sometimes come from other people's ideas. Probably didn't explain that well, but
no, I think you explained it really well. And I think, you know, again, I'll go back to you know, Harrison and his clock. Again, a clock was not a new idea, right? Clock was not a new idea, but it was applied to a different problem, or not even a terribly different problem. But, you know, many would say that one of the reasons why there are so many former Commonwealth countries is because Britain solved that longitude problem first. So its ships could reliably get around and trade, which for a shortish period of time made it a fairly formidable contestant in world events. So, you know, a really old technology, or relatively old technology at the time, applied to a problem in a particular way, actually had this massive effect. Sorry, can you tell I am really a fangirl of that? There's a book by Dava Savell called Longitude, which I've made all my children read, and it's a brilliant story, and I strongly recommend that you have a look at it. Oh, sorry, I'm about to swipe you away. Turns my right hand's getting tired. Let's see how we go. So I want to remind you about this now. So this you can't see. For those of you playing along at home, if you, I think I've got a slightly different image. But we
can see it. It's the slide that it's in the lecture as well. The different types of disruptive innovation.
Yes.
Innovation.
Innovation, yeah, different types of innovation. So I just wanted to remind you about it. The particular version of this slide that I've downloaded. So I'd actually recommend, if you know you're interested in this stuff, I'd actually recommend reading Gary Pisano's article. It's a Harvard Business Review article. It's really easy to read. It's freely available online. It's really not very hard to find. But I think because he talks about a lot of innovations, he talks about a lot of the issues that come up, but he talks particularly about the strategy for innovation. But so when we're thinking about innovation, generally, you guys have had the benefit of Master's lecture and a little bit of reading to think about this, but you're tending to think about it, people tend to think about it as digital and new and potentially disruptive. Actually, let's take a second to talk about disruption. What does disruption mean? What do you understand by disruption? Is it your dog barking when you're on a Zoom meeting?
No, I think it's that too, but I think it has a lot to do with kind of forcing change, forcing. I would say forcefulness and uncomfortableness.
Forcefulness and uncomfortableness. Is anybody else thinking? I think it's really important to talk about what disruption is, what in innovation language or business language, when we talk about disruption, most people will be using that word in this context in the way that Clayton Christensen uses it. And so disruption, and it's quite funny actually, because I work with startups all the time and they're always telling me they're going to be a disruptor. Like, well, you know, actually, definitionally, you can't know you're going to be a disruptor in advance, actually. Disruption happens when something else is disrupted. So let me tell you a story, actually, about a company. I won't tell you what the company is, but in the early 1990s, it was the biggest company of its type in the world, an American company. It had some technology where it was, everybody agreed, including its competitors, that its technology was significantly superior to anybody else's technology at the time doing the same thing. It was the choice of both professional users of this technology and amateur users most of the way around the world. The only some other providers were pretty good, but if you could afford their technology, pretty much everybody would choose this one. Its share price, the company had been around for over 100 years at this stage, and its share price had never been higher. It had never had more employees. Like any good large company, it's a significant company. I really should have written down some statistics before I came so I could give you some numbers. But like any good large company, it had an R&D department, and it developed a completely different way of producing a similar sort of thing from the thing that they produced. But the quality was significantly inferior, and the cost of further developing this particular technology in this way, looking at it this way, would have been significant. That's all the facts I'm going to give you. Some of you will have worked out who I'm talking about, of course. If you were the board of that company, would you continue investing in that technology that was vastly inferior? Or would you put your money and time into continuing on with the business that you have, where you are definitely the best of the best? Quick. Yeah, I've got to vote for, I'll go with the inferior one because I can make it better. So you would take money out of your flagship product because everybody else, you're number one. So your only way is down, right? You can only get worse. And the competitors, they're doing what they can. You've been around for hundreds of years making similar sorts of stuff. So patents are being released and all the rest of it. But you would put your money into this digitally inferior or this inferior product.
I would. When you were saying that, I don't know if this is the company, but I had in my head like Kodak.
Kodak is the company that I am talking about.
That's what I was thinking.
And I mean, I'm putting it that way because I don't think I would have had the balls for it, quite frankly. I think I would have done what the board of Kodak did. Now, 10 years after, roughly, they made that decision that they were going to shelve this inferior product. They were bankrupt. But 10 years before they were bankrupt, they were at the top of their game. Now, they were disrupted ironically, by technology that they decided not to invest significantly in. Much the same as the world's greatest Cartwrights. You know what a Cartwright is? They make, you don't need to, they make wheels for carts. They were all disrupted when Henry Ford decided that he would produce the Model T Ford in any colour you want, as long as it's black. That the motor vehicle was quite inferior to a horse and cart until it wasn't. Digital cameras. Now, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on with Kodak and that digital. They were, so in Clayton Christensen's definition of what a disruptor is, they were at the peak of their game. They were investing, as is quite sensible, in making sure they stayed at the peak of their game. What they were doing was making sure that they were always the best. They didn't necessarily realize that actually a large part of their customer base didn't want the best. They just wanted a picture. And in fact, when you could take a picture on your phone and carry it with you, it didn't actually matter that it was pretty terrible quality. They just want their kid and their puppy. They don't need something that's going to be archival quality that lasts for however many years. And again, one of the things that often we think about, and need to think about with technology is, what is the technology for, or the innovation for? So quite famously, I think it's Black & Decker, they make drills. Every year they have their big sales conference, and apparently they put a big slide up on the wall. They must have stopped it by now because so many people know about it. Big slide in their theatre of millions of salespeople, and are showing their yellow drills and saying, why do people buy from us? And most people are thinking because they want a drill. They need a drill, so they're going to buy our drill, and our drill is better in this way and that way, or not as good in some other way, or it's cheaper, or whatever it is. Nobody wants a drill. What they want is to hang a picture on the wall, or to assemble their cot, or to fix a squeaky door, or for their partner to be more manly. Whatever it is they want. Nobody actually wants a drill, right? So thinking about what the innovation is for, what problem it solves, is a really important part of understanding how technologies work, and ultimately pushing into how it intersects with the law. So moving around. So quickly hide all of this, because don't worry, there's a magic point. So what I have on this slide, I'm going to turn it around so you guys can see. Ultimately, this is going to come up on this innovation landscape model that I've got here. I have listed 7 different things that could arguably be called innovations. Hopefully, most of them will be known to you in some way. I think most of you have heard about the mRNA vaccine. So based on research that was being done for completely different reasons over 20 years or so. So a technology. Nuclear-powered submarines. Australia's going to have some of those in about 20 years, apparently. Anybody Black Mirror fans? I think Black Mirror could be a really good beginning to almost any research paper. But I'm thinking more about the way that the Bandersnatch movie worked, where you could choose your own adventure. A GoFundMe campaign. I believe one of our politicians thinks we might replace taxes with that. Oh, sorry, did I say that out loud? Drones for agricultural pest control, audiobooks or podcasts, or devices that you can talk to and do stuff. And what I want you to do when you're on your Menti slide, you will be able to see those 2 axes. So essentially, I want you to place each of those between, is it an existing technology or something new? And then I've used the word business model here. We could, on the other slide I just showed you, we used it as markets. Don't get too caught up in what a business model is yet. Really think about that. Is it an existing or an old application? And then there's going to be some magic here that I'm going to show you. I'm going to get a sense of what people think. Now, effectively, I'm crowdsourcing here as well, I'd just like to point out. crowdsourcing your thoughts. Don't get too hung up about it because there is no right or wrong answer. And what we're doing is we're going to be combining this with the group before. That's accidental, but let's pretend it's on purpose.
So, Kath, you want us to locate these examples into the quadrant? Is that what you want us to do?
Well, if you're using the Menti.
Oh, the Menti, back to the Menti.
In the Menti. Sorry, if you go into the Menti, it's actually going to ask you for each of those things.
Correct.
So
yes.
it's going to ask you to do that. And then once we get some of those in, we can see what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is a bit frustrating about that is it's a little bit difficult for you to see what we end up with, but we'll make that work. And because I can embed the end result into the canvas, you'll actually be able to play with it a little bit.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And by the way, I didn't mention, but there are a bunch of examples in the chat that I couldn't keep up with of disruptive innovations, Airbnb, Uber, PayPal, crypto, FTPOS, and so on.
Oh, FPOS, yeah. FPOS is a really good call, actually, because nowadays we don't even really think about that. But just, yeah, there's so much stuff happening in the financial services world. Let's see, we've got a few different combinations here now. Let's just have a look. Let's see if I can turn that around and share with you. Now, when we do this next time, I think we'll all be able to see the chat and it'll work a little bit better, I think. So actually, really interestingly, so I'm just going to point my camera up. Sorry, there we go. So that you can see there. It looks like everything's sort of clustered around the middle. The magic that I want to show you is, I'm guessing anyway, people actually have very different views. So it's actually captured here. So I'm looking at the mRNA vaccines at the moment, and I'm in everybody's way. But you can see that's giving us the average. And actually, we've got on absolutely opposite sides here. There are some people who are identifying that as a existing technology, existing business model, and an equal number down right at the other end, as in brand new technology. So again, we get different views. Now, see, this one surprises me because I think submarines have been around for a really good long time. Nuclear submarines have been around for a really long time as well. A business model where you buy something and you don't get to see what's inside it, again, that's pretty much everything before technology, right? So black box, I find this really interesting that it's got such a spread. But again, I mean, and anybody who wants to argue with me, because there are people who absolutely see nuclear submarines completely differently from me by the looks of this. So you're thinking about something different. So what's interesting to me here is that we think about technology differently. We think about business models differently. I haven't given you a chance to do any research or really understand. You're just making guesses here, and we'll find that they become more educated guesses as we move through this process. Sorry, just let me do that.
Obviously on this, because I think in my mindset, some of these things, like the GoFundMe page, I was thinking about when, I was thinking about when things started. So I've like taken my mind back to, oh yeah, nuclear power submarines where they knew it. So
Okay.
we're talking like right now.
No, sorry, I was thinking about right now, but I can see why there'd be a different kind of thought.
Really, none of that is new now, is it? So it's
no. Well, there is some stuff. So there's some stuff that's happening in that space. Yeah. So one of the things that I want to be able to talk about or think about is going back to this intellectual property idea as well, this underlying assumption that something has to be owned. And so a lot of what's happening in the open innovation space in particular, and especially in relation to broader intellectual property rights, is really calling that assumption does something need to be owned at all? So I know I read some press just last week about a new vaccine, COVID vaccine technology that's in the process of testing. Oh, I've got such old lady brain today, I cannot remember. So that's actually a very inappropriate statement. Nobody ever says I've got young lady brain, do they? I'm having a little brain fog. I can't remember where it's being tested, but the idea of this particular vaccine is that it's not going to be patented. It's going to be open source. It's going to be available for everybody to use. Now, many of you will be aware of the polio vaccine. When I was a girl, people were still getting polio in Australia, all over the world. There were people in iron lungs. Actually, I live next door to an old hospital, and there used to be people in iron lungs in that particular hospital up until the turn of the century, essentially. But the inventors of the polio vaccine, which is understood to be one of the most successful vaccines of all time, it wasn't only successful because of the technology, it was successful because the inventors of that vaccine decided to not claim intellectual property rights over it, to make it available globally. So sometimes we question these assumptions. We start, especially as lawyers, we're like, okay, we're lawyers, we need to put this into a particular framework. So who owns this? Who regulates it? Who pays tax on it? Do we buy and sell it, or do we license it? What kind of structure is needed here? Actually, I think we'd like to challenge you to stand back, absolutely, and think, okay, are those assumptions always going to be valid, and are they always going to be necessary? So at the moment, I mean, it is interesting to think about the mRNA vaccines and the business models that are being offered. I think what we're seeing is a general belief that we're not safe until we're all safe, and that unless we are able to spread vaccines globally, it is unlikely that we're going to see the situation we're in finish very quickly. So the business model for affecting that, well, up until now, has really been all about actually people grabbing enough for themselves in different countries. So, so I think we're using an old business model.
Diana mentions that sorry, Kath, that the COVID vaccines were also designed for specific consumer groups and ages initially.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
I can give you an example. So when I went to go get the vaccine initially, I was 39, and they wouldn't give me AstraZeneca. So I had to wait. I had to wait for the Pfizer. So I had to wait an extra 2 months. Even though I said I didn't mind getting it, they refused to give it to me.
Yeah. And my 21-year-old probably had it around the same time that you did.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that was a design as much as a risk issue. But again, but the business model, essentially, and I'm using that term very loosely, but the model that was used for distribution and payment for these vaccines was very different in Australia, even in different Australian states, than it was in other places that were more dramatically affected by COVID. And so I think in other places, so one of the things I think that has been new about, I'm going to call it the business model in that very loose and general sense, is how quickly approvals were dealt with, how we've actually challenged the assumptions about how long it takes for things to be done, and also how quickly they were rolled out and those kind of things. So I think there's probably something new in that over the last little while, but I think actually there's probably a lot more room for it personally. But oh goodness, we're talking too much because I go on. Sorry.
No, just very quickly, Kath, saying that I think you nailed it, because you've mentioned two things that are relevant in terms of innovation and regulation. One is with these innovations, such as the new generations of vaccines, they trigger different regulatory processes that we've seen, accelerating enormously the production and the approval of the vaccines. And with some of the examples that have been mentioned in the chat, Uber, PayPal, Airbnb, they also trigger regulatory challenges. I've seen in many European cities how the successes of Airbnb have provoked a lot of discussions at the local council levels about licenses for touristic apartments, how they clash with hotel regulations and so on.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, this is actually the next exercise that I want us to do. So essentially, this is where we're going to group up into some discussion groups. There are 3 kinds of questions here. I'm just going, because you're physically together, I'm going to say, if you're interested in question number 1, I'm going to head over to the left, question number 2 in the middle, and question number 3 over there. Online, Marta's set up some rooms for you so you can pop in where you are, and hopefully we get fairly even numbers. But essentially what I'd like you to do, and we'll come back together and share this if we can, we ran out of time for sharing last time, is just like you to think about, well, how does the law impact? I'm talking, again, we're using this term legal issue in a really broad way here, but there are 3 relatively common or relatively current issues. So we're talking about right now. So the first one, most of you will have heard about, the ban on the use by Russian banks of the SWIFT messaging. I'll get there eventually. The SWIFT messaging system. So in a nutshell, we will be thinking about this in a lot more detail, but SWIFT is basically a piece of technology. It's been around since the 1970s. It's, for a little bit of background, it's owned essentially by a consortium of different banks. So its users own it, a bit like stock exchanges in the olden days, for those of you who are interested in financial services. It's not very sophisticated or important technology in many ways, but it processes billions of messages every day. So I'm sure most of you have deposited money in a bank account at some stage. Some of you might have even taken cash to a bank account. But I'm hoping that you understand that when the bank takes your cash, they don't just put it in the safe and leave it there, right? It's not like you come back later and get your cash and they magically give you some other. The banks actually use that cash. So it goes into their vault, and then somebody comes and makes a loan from the bank. And that person, when they make a loan from the bank, they then use it to buy something. So let's say Catherine has borrowed money and she's paid it. Sorry, what's your name? Scarlett. Scarlett, she's bought a property from Scarlett. Scarlett takes the cash or the bank, the money, probably doesn't actually even see it as physical money anymore, and she puts it back in the bank. And then bank, I go and loan some money to, sorry, what's your name? James. And James, who would you like to buy something from? Sigrid. Okay, so you bought something from Sigrid there, and Sigrid, are you going to sit with that cash under your mattress? What are you going to do? She's going to put it in the bank. I remember you're Dutch, right? So that's what they do. The Dutch, they put their money in the bank, which is good for my example. And so, under prudential regulations, you can essentially do that 9 times. So essentially no actual physical money is moving around, right? We don't do that. Banks are just sending those messages to each other and adjusting their ledgers. So I'm the bank. I know that Catherine has deposited some money, so I owe Catherine that money. But then I've already forgotten. I was going to try with the names, but basically she owes me some, he owes me some, I owe her some. That's basically how it works. So SWIFT deals with that. It gets a kind of competitive advantage because banks do billions of transactions every day, right? It is not helpful to them if one of them's using system A and another one is using system B, and they have to work all of that stuff out. So the technology is pretty basic, but it serves a utility. It solves this problem. The problem when we stop it, of course, is that Russia can't actually send anybody outside of Russia any money, and it can't receive money from anybody outside. So the group who are going to be talking about that, I want you to think about what the legal issues are. Think about the regulatory issues, but also think about the impact, as we have been with these other things, about what areas of law are going to deal with this. And then if you run out of those things, think about what the ethical issues might be, because we'll keep coming back to them.
Kath, how much time do we have for that?
Sorry, I'm taking too long, aren't I? Sorry. I just wanted to make sure that that question was understood.
Sure.
And the Google turning off mobility data, they're nodding their heads in this end. Everybody's aware of that. I have no issue, by the way, with you Googling on the fly. Sigrid, that's from me to you. I'm sorry, that's an in-joke. Then the last one, I'm going to say, I was about to say that it's a bit of a whim of mine, but actually the federal court decided on this issue only a couple of weeks ago. So it's a 2022 judgment. I can share it with you a little bit later. But what legal issues do you think that there might be if you have artificial intelligence invent or create something? Let's do that really quickly because it's 8:20. Give you 5 minutes and we'll come back at the end.
Should we mute the two groups so we can chat better?
I will mute and we'll come back. 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Online team, I would suggest not to split ourselves into breakup rooms because we have limited time and 5 minutes. So it doesn't, and we are only 10, 11 of us. So why don't we keep it nice and short and simple? And from the 3 questions, you may have comments on any of the 3. The third one, if you didn't hear well, it's about a judge denying an AI system intellectual property, intellectual property rights because the artwork it produced was not produced by a person. So I know that these are different topics, the ban on SWIFT and the repercussions for a country that has been ejected from SWIFT from the last one. But if anyone has thoughts about it that we can share with the group, happy to take them on board.
I really think that last question's interesting. I want to delve a bit more into that. I mean, obviously the ownership side of it, you know, as in who does own the intellectual property? Did the person who created the artificial intelligence own the property? Or can artificial intelligence, like a company or a corporation, have legal status? And in the same vein, liability, if something were to go wrong, who do you sue if artificial intelligence is what created the product that failed?
Yes. I don't want to talk too much because I already did, but if someone else feels like jumping in.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about similar things. I'm just did the first lecture of company law today, and I was thinking about how that might relate to AI inventions. Yeah, in terms of sorry, I don't know your name. The other person, Brett, is it?
Brett.
Yeah. What
Brett
was just saying about liability and that kind of thing, and also the concept of a legal person, like how companies are kind of legal people. And the lecturer used the example of Frankenstein's monster as kind of standing in for a company, which made me think about that's what I thought of as soon as I heard this prompt. So yeah, those ideas around sort of if the AI technology is owned by a company and there are shareholders and then there are directors of that company, who has liability and who stands to make profit from that as well. Like I think aside from any kind of ethical or IP questions around the actual existence of AI as an emergent technology, I think, it creates interesting questions relating to company law as well.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
I was just thinking about the SWIFT bans, just the ethical issues.
Mhm.
They're
Go
doing it
ahead.
to obviously stop political things from happening, but it's also affecting everyday citizens. Yeah, that's probably my thoughts on it. They're
So
punishing everyone pretty much.
the ethical consequences of an international ban. You mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think Kath is expecting us to get back to the group. Yeah. So I'm very pleased because I think we managed to touch the three intersections I showed in the lecture about law, technology, and regulatory aspects. Kath, you're on mute. You are on mute? Yeah.
There we are. They're saying we'll come back soon so you don't all hate me. And we'll do a really quick rapid fire because the thinking is more important than the answer at the end of the day, I think, here. Okay, guys, let's pull it together. Where will we start? Will we start?
Can I start with the last one?
Yes, I was going to suggest the last one because we always want to, the people who get last always think they're going to get missed out.
I think, well, very briefly, I'm afraid I will not capture all the comments that have been made, but we touch on a very key point, which is that the current debate actually in the academia, but also in the industry, on whether AI should have legal personality or not, because that's a transformational legal principle, right? We've been extending legal personality from people to companies, to rivers in some cases.
Yeah.
So the next thing would be robots. Robots is a simplification of AI, but that's a debate whether robots ultimately will have legal personality or not, and that's connected with the IP issue that you were raising.
Yeah.
On the SWIFT, mostly ethical concerns, but
can we just see if there's anything that this third group? Was there anything you wanted to add there? Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Right, like we were talking about who would own it
and how that works. Yeah, I did overhear part of that conversation. I think it aligned. Just in case you're interested, I will share it afterwards. But the federal court was dealing with exactly this question very, very recently, and I believe they have got special leave to appeal. So the short answer for the question that was before that court was that in order for something to be invented, there needs to be a natural person inventor. But pretty much everybody who's looked at the decision is saying, yeah, that makes no sense. So it's going to be interesting to see what actually happens. So the SWIFT one is the next one. Where did you guys get to that on that one, Marta?
Mostly raising ethical concerns about a decision that will impact millions of people by ejecting them of accessing the transactions.
So, and the team here, I know we're talking too about the detail, because it's one thing when you're dealing with oligarchs and you're dealing with entities, business entities, but actually we're talking about, relatives overseas trying to send money back to their family can make that quite clearly quite difficult. And actually they've got quite a long list of legal issues here, including property law, inheritance, the economics issues, income streams, and cross-border transactions. One of the things that immediately I thought of, straight old-fashioned commercial lawyer I am, is who gets to tell SWIFT what they should and shouldn't do, and how are they empowered to do that, and how do they get compensated for the billions of transactions they're no longer doing, because that's how they get paid.
One of the other things that pops to my mind, I work in financial services as well, and one of the other things that popped into my mind that we're talking about, that a lot of these people are now saying, oh, that's okay, we can go through blockchain, we can use Bitcoin, and that sort of stuff is not tracked and regulated, and there's so much of that money that's used for illegal purposes that does Russia then just go, okay, well, we will still move money, but we will do it through means that potentially can't be tracked at all, so you don't really know what's happening.
That's interesting. So, yeah, absolutely. The last lot, last question was around the turning off mobility data. Actually, well, how about we get the guys in the room first time because I'm pointing at you. What did you come up with first time round?
We went on the ethical route, but I guess the biggest legal issue for us was like, so we were talking about like an ambulance not being able to see where the traffic is. Do they get stuck in traffic? Does the person die because they're waiting too long? Can they be sued for that sort of thing? Was kind of where we went, and then we were talking about like, does Google get to make the decision as to what they can and can't? And then we went on a little trail around how much data Google have about us.
You know, there isn't a Russian Google that still tracks it anyway.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about how mobility data works at some point along the line. So, Marta and team, did you have anything else you wanted to add in relation to that one? Sorry, it was all very quick in the end.
It was very quick, but I think it was effective. So don't worry.
She hasn't met me clearly because she knows I will worry. But hey, that's all right. I'll worry out loud and you'll all laugh at the same time. Anything you'd like to add in there, Marta, for the last one? On behalf of your teams?
Kath, I think your voice now, it's a bit choppy, which was not before, but given the time, I think that it's good to conclude, to leave it here, and just thank you so much, because I'm very aware of the effort of going through the mobile, not being able to access from the laptop.
It'll be easier next week. It will be easier next week, I promise.
But it worked very well, I would say, because we could hear you very well most of the time, just tiny bits at the end. But it was entertaining, and and I told these people we should have fun. I mean, life is very complicated. The tutorial should be fun, and you made it fun.
I feel like I feel what I need is for somebody to take a photo of us on the photo, and then like, is that a screenshot? Like, I'm sure I can do that.
I'm taking one screenshot right now.
Oh, that's much better. Oh, I just turned my phone off. Oh, no. Just hit the right button. I'll just get you all in there. There we go. Oh, see, no, old ladies should not be allowed to use technology. Oh, now I'm doing it again. I'm making ageist comments. I'm trying so hard to be woke. It's not happening. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention. Marta, when will they see your next lecture?
Next week. Tomorrow I will open up topic 2. Whoever wants to browse the slides and the readings, and a bit later I'll upload the second lecture. I hope that you will like it. Yes, tech difficulties in a law and tech class, the irony. It's always like that, Brett. That's my experience.
How many hybrid classes have you done? Have you guys done a hybrid class before? No? Would you know, like,
yeah,
I should have a mentee to ask you, actually, like, whether or not you would, like, 9 out of 10 face-to-face people would disagree or take it on. I think it's much better. The more conversation we have, I think it's better. And it's like, I just wish we could have you all in the same room so we can have Marta with you all. If you are face-to-face and you cannot attend, you can just contact us and we'll give you the link so you can join in online if you would. The preference is clearly to have you here because you need to get to know each other and work in the groups. But absolutely, look, at the end of the day, it's about your learning. It's not about what suits us. And hopefully between us all, when I say all, I don't mean just me and Marta, I mean all of us, including you. We find ways to work together because the technology, it needs to be useful, right? And the people it needs to be useful for are you. So we're just trying to find the best ways to deliver your learning, or ways for you to learn. I mean, we can't actually learn for you.
That's a new technology.
There it is.
I'm not sure.
Take the red pill. Thank you, team.
Thank you all.
Good to see some lovely old-fashioned faces that I've seen before. And hopefully, we'll have a good semester. Take care.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.